You know that common idea, the one we all sort of hear, that companies flock to China just for, like, rock bottom labor costs?
Hmm.
Well, maybe think again. In 2025, that might just be, well, completely outdated.
Yeah, that's definitely something we need to unpack.
So today on the deep dive, we're going deep. We're looking past the headlines at the real reasons for China's manufacturing strength, the actual costs, and, what it all means for globalization.
Exactly. And we've got some really interesting stuff to draw on for you, expert commentary from videos, some sharp news pieces, written analyses. It's a good mix.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, our mission today is really to get past that simple, cheap labor narrative.
Mm.
We want to understand the dynamics now, China's role, and give you a much clearer picture.
Okay, let's start right there then. Let's dismantle this cheap labor myth. Our sources, especially some of the video clips, they're pretty blunt about it. China isn't the super low-wage place it once was.
Not primarily, no.
So if it's not just about saving money on wages, what is the big draw?
Well, what keeps coming up again and again in the material is skill. And not just skill, but the sheer quantity of skill in one location and the type of skill. We're talking advanced tooling, especially.
Advanced tooling, like the really complex machinery needed for modern gadgets.
Precisely. The expertise needed to design, build, and operate that tooling. Our sources argue China has a depth there. No, it's hard to find anywhere else on that scale.
I remember that analogy one speaker used. It really stuck with me about tooling engineers.
Oh, yeah.
He said, try gathering them in the US. Maybe you fill a room. In China, you could fill football stadiums, plural.
Wow. Yeah. That really paints a picture, doesn't it? The scale is just immense.
It is, and it's not accidental, right?
Not at all. One expert we looked at points directly to China's education system,
Yeah.
specifically its long-term focus on vocational training.
So they invested in building those specific practical skills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While maybe other places shifted focus, China kept prioritizing it, building this incredible pool of specialized talent over decades.
Okay, let's make this super concrete. Think about an iPhone, something most of us use. One source actually mentioned the estimated cost to manufacture an iPhone 14 in China. Not the parts, the actual assembly and manufacturing process. Any guesses? Just ballpark.
Manufacturing cost, separate from components, maybe $50, 100. It's complex assembly.
Okay, reasonable guesses. Higher than some people might think, maybe. But the source, and this person visited the factories, met the Foxconn chairman.
Okay.
They put the figure around $10.
$10.
Yeah.
Just $10.
$10, yeah. It kind of makes your head spin, doesn't it? It shows the value isn't just in the basic labor.
Wow, kidding. $10. That speaks volumes about efficiency, doesn't it? It's not about paying people pennies. It's about an incredibly optimized system.
Right. Decades of know-how, the whole supply chain humming along. It's a system that's really, really hard to just copy somewhere else.
It's become this massive competitive edge, almost a barrier, like you said.
Yeah.
And going back to the skills point, that efficiency relies heavily on having tons of engineers readily available. So even if a company wants to move production, finding that concentration of engineering talent elsewhere is a huge challenge.
Makes total sense. Modern electronics, they're just so complex. They need that sophisticated tooling, those advanced processes.
And the numbers back it up. Our sources mention China graduating something like 1.4 to 1.5 million engineers every year.
1.5 million annually.
Yeah, it's apparently close to a third of all the engineering grads in the world. That's a massive national focus on STEM.
It's staggering.
And think about the supporting industries, too. It's not just the assembly lines. We're talking something like 30,000 companies just in the tool and hold industry.
30,000.
Yeah, and over 5,700 tool machine manufacturers. Plus, there's significant government support for the high-tech stuff, like CNC machines, the computer-controlled ones, for precision work.
So it's this whole massive interconnected ecosystem built around manufacturing expertise, far beyond just cheap hands.
Precisely. It's layers upon layers of capability.
Okay, so that paints a really clear picture of why China remains such a powerhouse. But it also raises bigger questions, doesn't it, about globalization itself?
It does.
We saw that quote, I think it was from the UK Prime Minister, suggesting globalization might have failed. That strong word.
It is strong.
Mm.
And the thinking behind it, according to the sources, seems to stem from a few things. Geopolitical friction, definitely. Think about the U.S.-China trade situation.
The tariffs.
Yeah, President Trump's tariffs, which were explicitly aimed at bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., for economic security. That whole situation forced a rethink.
Did people see that coming? The source mentioned some were shocked it actually happened.
Yeah, maybe some didn't take the rhetoric that seriously initially, but it marked a shift. There's now this pushback, a feeling among some leaders that deep global ties have downsides, and they prefer more national control, maybe more voluntary cooperation, instead of deep integration.
A sense that the benefits weren't shared equally, maybe?
That seems to be part of it, yeah. A perception that globalization left certain groups or regions behind within their own countries.
So this leads to talk of reshoring, bringing manufacturing home. Sounds good in theory, but the sources highlight some big practical problems.
Oh, huge problems.
Mm.
First off, the cost. Remember that $10 iPhone manufacturing cost?
Yeah.
One analyst estimates making that same iPhone in the U.S. could push the total cost up towards maybe $3,000 per phone.
3,000, that's a massive difference.
It highlights the cost efficiency gap.
Yeah.
And it's not just cost, it's time. You need to rebuild the skilled workforce,
Yeah.
get permits, build factories, install equipment.
Years, not months.
Exactly. One estimate suggests that even limited U.S. iPhone production wouldn't be realistic before 2028, maybe even later.
Wow. And I know Apple announced big investments in the U.S., like $500 billion.
They did, yeah. But it's important context. Our sources clarify that huge number isn't specifically earmarked just for making iPhones domestically.
Yeah.
It's broader investment.
Okay, that's a key distinction. It also connects to another interesting point raised in the material. This idea that maybe globalization got something wrong from the start.
How so?
The assumption that you could easily separate designing a product from actually making it.
Ah, right. That's a fascinating argument. The idea is when you concentrate manufacturing somewhere, like China, that place doesn't just stay hands-on. It starts developing serious design expertise, too, because the designers and manufacturers are constantly interacting, sharing knowledge, intellectual property, best practices.
Yeah.
People move between firms.
So the manufacturing hub learns and moves up the value chain itself.
Exactly. And that creates more competition for the countries that maybe started out leading in design but outsourced the making.
As like maybe relying too much on that crutch of cheap labor elsewhere, as one source called it.
Yeah.
It actually slowed down innovation back home.
Yeah.
Because it was just easier to get it made cheaply than to invest in smarter, better ways to make things domestically.
That's definitely an argument presented. That readily available cheap manufacturing can, paradoxically, dampen the drive for true manufacturing innovation. Why bother with the hard stuff if there's an easy, cheap option?
Interesting tension there. But despite all this questioning and the challenges, globalization isn't just going away, is it?
Not according to several perspectives we reviewed. One strong argument is that you simply can't stop globalization or trade easily. Trying to do so could be really destabilizing, potentially even leading to conflict.
Okay.
And while acknowledging the problems like, lack of opportunities for some, encouraging poorer countries, these sources also stress the positives. Globalization has lifted many economies over the last 30 years.
So the argument is more about fixing it, not scrapping it.
Kind of. That maybe globalization in its current form is still pretty new, historically speaking, and it needs adjustments, improvements, rather than just being abandoned.
And practically speaking, we're just too interconnected now.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Global supply chains are incredibly tangled. Trying to completely separate them would be astronomically expensive and disruptive. Plus, think about technology. No country has everything it needs.
True. And big global problems.
Yeah.
Pandemics, climate change.
Right. They demand international cooperation, not isolation. And fundamentally, many economies still rely heavily on global markets for their prosperity.
So, despite the talk of pulling back, the money is still flowing globally.
Seems like it. One source pointed to something like $7 trillion in investment commitments from companies looking to invest globally. That includes big names like Apple, but also lots of, say, Taiwanese companies planning expansions.
$7 trillion. That's a huge amount of planned investment.
It is. It signals that despite the headwinds, global economic engagement is far from over. It just takes time, to build new factories, new supply chains.
Right. These shifts are measured in years, decades even.
Absolutely.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive.
Yeah.
Wow. It's clear the old China equals cheap labor line just doesn't cut it in 2025.
Not anymore.
The reality is much more about this incredible depth of skill, especially in engineering and complex tooling. That's the bedrock now.
And that expertise allows for that stunning efficiency, like the low iPhone manufacturing costs we talked about.
Yeah, that $10 figure is hard to forget. And trying to just undo all that, bring production back wholesale, The sources show it's incredibly difficult, huge costs, massive time investment to rebuild that kind of industrial base.
It's not just flipping a switch.
Not at all. So hopefully you listening now have, a much richer sense of what's really driving global manufacturing today. We've gone beyond the easy answers, looked at skills, costs, the whole globalization debate, and the real-world challenges of shifting things around.
It's definitely complex with lots of interconnected parts.
For sure. So here's a final thought for you to sort of chew on. Given everything we've discussed, this deep entanglement of the global economy, the benefits, the drawbacks, the practical hurdles, what do you think the future holds? Is it about finding a better, maybe fairer version of globalization? Or are we inevitably heading towards, I don't know, more regional, localized economic blocks?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. Something to ponder using the perspectives we've explored today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.